Shall we continue notre aventure avec Arsène Diop, aka Paul Sernine, aka Luis Perenna, aka Arsène Lupin? Time for episode 4. Let's dig in and see what great French grammar and expressions that we can pick out to help you become a bit more confident with your French. Allez, si vous êtes prêts, c'est parti pour épisode 4. Alors, quite close to the beginning of the episode, there's two uses of avoir here, once in the present tense and once in the future tense. First of all, the guy says, je l'ai, and he's talking about the drone. He's trying to chase this drone around. He says, I have it, or I've got it. And then later, there's a note written, it says, je t'aurai, I will get you. I will get you. It's the future tense of avoir. And I bring this up because in English we use the verb to get a lot. And this doesn't easily translate to French, right? When we talk about getting something in terms of having something or the possession of something, that's just one use, one meaning of the word get. Think about it. We can use get to talk about understanding. I get it. I get him. Or I got sick. It means I became sick. One use of it is to talk about possession of something. And in French, the best equivalent is avoir, one of the most common verbs that you already use and you will use with the French language. So if you're trying to translate get to French and you're talking about specifically the possession of something, use avoir.
Bah souris de moi. Je t'ai apporté un cadeau. Ton circé. Tu l'as bien cassé.
Qu'est-ce que tu veux encore?
Je veux tout savoir sur ton ami.
Mon ami?
Pellegrini. Qu'est-ce que tu voulais lui dire l'autre jour, par exemple?
Now, I'm sure you've noticed that fast, natural spoken French sounds a lot different sometimes to how it's actually written. And here is a good example. In fact, we hear the version of something that is closer to the written form, and then we hear one which is, I would say, more commonly heard. So, le commissaire here, Dumont, says, Qu'est-ce que tu veux encore? And he says, Qu'est-ce que tu veux? He articulates all that quite well.
Qu'est-ce que tu veux encore?
Qu'est-ce que tu veux encore? Like, what do you want again? But we're focused on the Qu'est-ce que tu veux? And Arsène responds a little bit later, Qu'est-ce que tu voulais lui dire? Qu'est-ce que tu voulais lui dire?
Qu'est-ce que tu voulais lui dire l'autre jour, par exemple?
So here, Qu'est-ce que tu became Qu'est-ce tu. Qu'est-ce tu. Qu'est-ce que tu voulais dire? Qu'est-ce que tu voulais lui dire? So this is very, very common to say this in this way because it's something so commonly said. It just all gets smushed together to make things faster and smoother. But I like how both forms were said in quite quick succession to show us that it is possible to hear a more articulated form, which gives us confidence to know that if we say that longer form, we're still absolutely correct.
Tu veux faire tomber Pellegrini? Il y a une femme qui s'appelle Fabienne Berriot qui peut t'aider. C'est une journaliste. Il y a quelques années, elle a failli le couler.
Alors, you might know that presque is the way to say almost in French. Par exemple, j'ai presque fini mes devoirs ou j'ai presque terminé Lupin. Right? Very easy. You just translate almost to presque and you're good. Presque, grammatically speaking, is an adverb. Le commissaire here, par contre, he said failli. Elle a failli le couler.
C'est une journaliste. Il y a quelques années, elle a failli le couler.
Now, failli is the past participle of the verb faillir. So this actually means almost, and it has to be used in conjunction with another verb. And I only ever see it in the past tense, in the passé composé or the plus que parfait. Now, perhaps it could also be used in other forms, but these are by far the most common times you hear it. But like I say, it's not an adverb like presque, it's a verb. So you actually have to change its form depending on the tense it's in. So in the past tense here, like in the passé composé, he says, elle a failli le couler. Elle a failli le couler. Check out a link down in the description to read about faillir. It's interesting, grammatically speaking. But that's two ways to say almost, presque ou faillir.
J'avais pas les moyens de me défendre et je me suis fait écraser.
Bah alors on a un ennemi en commun. C'est Pellegrini.
Oh, écoute, je suis très occupé, je te retiens pas.
Vous êtes comme moi. Vous voulez vous venger de Pellegrini.
On a récupéré un paquet d'images de caméras de surveillance et on va convoquer les témoins pour un portrait robot. On va vite avoir la tête de celui qui s'en est pris à vous, commissaire.
Parfait. Bah allez-y, je vous retiens pas.
Here I've used two clips that are a few minutes apart because they both contain examples of using the verb retenir. Retenir, but specifically to retenir quelqu'un. One is with te and one is with vous, but they both are using the same meaning of retenir. As you can see on screen now, there is quite a lot of meanings for retenir, but we're focusing on the one which I think is empêcher de partir. Empêcher de partir, and Fabien, for example, in the first clip, she says, je te retiens pas.
C'est Pellegrini.
Oh, écoute, je suis très occupé, je te retiens pas.
Je te retiens pas. She wants him to leave. She says, I'm not stopping you from leaving, which basically means, please leave, right? And then secondly, the commissaire says, allez-y, je vous retiens pas. It's basically him saying, well, go for it. Yeah, I'm not stopping you. I'm not holding you back. I'm not retaining you. I'm not detaining you. Go for it.
Parfait. Bah allez-y, je vous retiens pas.
So I learned a use of this verb here in two different contexts, but with the same meaning. So I'm hoping that that's going to help me le retenir. Another meaning of retenir, to retain. We can also talk about it with vocabulary. You know, we want to retain vocabulary as French learners. So it's quite a good verb for you to learn if you're actually in a stage of your French where you're trying to soak up lots of information all the time.
Mais il a été un peu trop loin. J'ai plus rien. Donc j'ai plus rien à perdre.
Here I want to look at one of the ways you structure a negative sentence in French. Now, you're familiar with ne and pas, right? Ne and pas, so for example, je n'ai pas, I don't have. Now, if you use plus instead of pas, so je n'ai plus, or in regular everyday speech, they drop the ne and just say j'ai plus, it means I no longer have, or I don't have any more. And this is super common. And I bring this up because she says j'ai plus rien. J'ai plus rien, so she goes even further.
J'ai plus rien.
So you can say je n'ai pas ou j'ai pas for I don't have. Je n'ai plus ou j'ai plus for I have no longer. And then you can say j'ai rien ou je n'ai rien for I have nothing. Well, here she combines both plus and rien, and it basically means I have nothing left anymore. I no longer have anything. And this is actually really common in everyday French speech, but it can be hard for us to transition over from saying pas to plus, and then it's one step further to say plus rien. So I urge you to listen out for this wherever you get your French exposure.
J'ai plus rien. Donc j'ai plus rien à perdre.
So she says j'ai plus rien, and then she goes even further with that, and she says j'ai plus rien à perdre. I have nothing left to lose. So think about it like that. It's like j'ai rien is I have nothing, and if you say j'ai plus rien, you say I have nothing left. I no longer have anything, but nothing left would be the most courant anglais. It would be the most everyday used translation of that. Je n'ai plus rien à perdre, ou j'ai plus rien à perdre.
Vous servez de ces dossiers-là?
Non, vas-y, prends-les.
Now, if you're anything like me, you use the verb utiliser a lot, right? It translates to use, and it's an excellent verb, and it's very common. For some reason, we as French learners seem to need to use it a lot, use it, right? And that's really good. But if you're after a synonym, just to sort of split it, maybe 50% of the time you want to say use, you use utiliser, and you want a synonym that's also a pronominal verb, which will make you feel better and more accomplished as a French speaker, then I would urge you to use se servir de. Se servir de. So you can say je me sers de quelque chose. Je me sers de ces expressions, for example. And it's the same as saying j'utilise ces expressions. Je me sers de ces expressions. So you have it as a pronominal verb, which is also tricky to use, especially when you go into trying to put it in the past tense. Je me suis servi de. And then you have to remember that it's also followed by the preposition de, which can complicate things a bit later. But in the present tense, just say j'utilise ce stylo ou je me sers de ce stylo. And he says vous vous servez de ces papiers, I think.
Vous servez de ces dossiers-là?
Non, vas-y, prends-les.
Vous vous servez de ces dossiers-là. And this is the form of se servir, but with the subject of vous. So both the subject pronoun is vous and the reflexive pronoun is vous. So vous vous servez de ces dossiers. Donc, les verbes utiliser et se servir sont des synonymes.
Attentat de Kuala Lumpur en 96. Ça dit quelque chose.
Attaque terroriste?
11 morts dans 8 Français.
Here's my old friend donc, which is one of those tricky grammatical things for us English speakers. And here is one use of it. She says, 11 morts, dont 8 Français. 11 morts, dont 8 Français. So she's saying 11 dead, of which 8 are or were French. And what's interesting for me here is that you don't actually need the verb être for to be. You don't have to say of which 8 were or are French. You just say dont 8 Français. 11 morts, dont 8 Français. And that's a tricky one for me to remember because sometimes in some cases with dont, you kind of need to use être to be clear, but I still have to question myself about how to structure these sentences.
Attaque terroriste?
11 morts dans 8 Français.
Don't is tricky because it makes you have to restructure sentences than you would in English, but actually it's quite simple when you think about it grammatically because it actually translates to of whom or of which when you're talking about a part of a whole. So the whole here is the 11 dead, unfortunately, and the part is 8 of them who are or were French. It's easy to get around from using dont. You could just say 11 morts, and then you could just say 8 de ces morts étaient français, right? But here, the perfect French phrase for this is 11 morts, dont 8 français. And we're going to have a look at another use of dont a bit later on.
24 heures après le mystérieux tweet de l'anonyme Salvatore, nous sommes en direct de la résidence d'Hubert Pellegrini, où une conférence de presse est sur le point de débuter.
Following on from the little bit about synonyms earlier with utiliser and se servir, here another one where you tend to use commencer, or at least I do, commencer to say start something. As learners with more limited vocabulary, I say commencer for every use of start, but you can also say in English to begin, to kick off, right? Things like that. In French, you can also say many different things, one of which that is used here is débuter. Une conférence de presse est sur le point de débuter.
Ou une conférence de presse est sur le point de débuter.
And I like this. I'm trying to sprinkle this verb in at different occasions when I want to use commencer, but it's true that I still do doubt whether there are important nuances between the verbs commencer, débuter, entamer, démarrer, right? And it's only through experience, just keeping your ears open, that you figure out the nuances. But generally speaking, you can use débuter, talk about something, commencer. If you can use débuter, you can definitely use commencer.
La France est un pays dont on peut être fier. Notre économie, notre culture est enviée, imitée, notre influence sur le monde reste forte.
And here is that second use of dont that I was talking about earlier. La France est un pays dont on peut être fier.
La France est un pays dont on peut être fier.
Dont on peut être fier. Now, why do we use dont here instead of que? Because he's saying France is a country that we can be proud of. Well, it's because, and I did a video on this, it's because you can't end a sentence in a preposition in French. There are some rules that sort of break this, but generally speaking, you can't end a sentence in a preposition. The preposition would be of in English, a country that we can be proud of. You can't say that in French. You've got to maybe reformulate the sentence you do in English to be of which. Of which. And what is the word which translates best to of which? Well, it's dont. So it's fier de quelque chose ou fier de quelqu'un. So in this case, it's fier de la France ou fier du pays. So you have to replace the de plus the thing you're proud of. And that all gets bundled into dont. So la France est un pays dont on peut être fier. Dont on peut être fier. So this is the second use of dont. So I want to spend the last part of this video talking about the different ways we use faire plus another verb here, because this is called le causatif. Le causatif in French is when you cause an action to happen. The closest thing you can say to make it make sense directly from English is to say make something else happen, make X happen, right? But with that case, we have make plus the thing plus happen. So happen is the verb. Well, the French say faire plus immediately the verb. So faire se passer quelque chose or faire arriver quelque chose if you want to use the equivalent of happen, right? And they use this a lot, where in English we might not necessarily use that structure. So it can be hard when you start getting to want to use this language at that upper intermediate stage, but you start realizing it more and more how common it is and you want to mimic the French. So the first example of le causatif that I want to look at is when Arsène says on va faire sortir ce cher Salvatore de l'ombre.
Allez au boulot. On va faire sortir ce cher Salvatore de l'ombre.
Now here, he's saying that we're going to make Salvatore come out of the shadows. He's not saying we're going to bring him out of the shadows, although that's what they're doing. We in English would more likely say we're going to bring him out of the shadows, right? That suggests that we are doing the action ourselves. But in French, they're a bit more precise, I would say. They're saying on va faire sortir. We're going to make him come out. We're going to be the cause of him coming out. So that's exactly what they're saying. So that's the first use of le causatif.
On va faire sortir ce cher Salvatore de l'ombre.
If the second one makes this even clearer what we're talking about.
Ça faisait des années que j'étais plus cette femme. Tu as fait revenir Fabienne Berriot, Hassan. C'est ça, mon cadeau.
So, as you can see, the second example of le causatif is when Fabienne says tu as fait revenir Fabienne Berriot. Tu as fait revenir. Now here, she's saying that she lost that version of herself, and you, Arsène, tu as fait revenir Fabienne Berriot. You brought back that version of her, of me. And so she's not saying you brought back literally, you're saying you caused it to happen, because he didn't actually physically bring her out of herself, right? He encouraged it. He made it happen through talking to her, through convincing her, through working with her. So this is why we say fait revenir.
Tu as fait revenir Fabienne Berriot, Hassan.
La troisième utilisation du causatif is when she says on va pas se faire avoir deux fois. On va pas se faire avoir.
La France d'en haut nous a encore bien enfumés, j'accuse. On va pas se faire avoir deux fois.
And this is a combination of the causatif that I'm talking about, using faire with another verb, and also using avoir in the sense of to be tricked, to be had, to be duped. You say avoir quelqu'un, it's another use of avoir, is to dupe someone, right? You can say je t'ai eu, I got you, I duped you. And when you're talking about you being duped, so in more passive voice, instead of saying être eu, so to be had, which you could say and would be understood because grammatically it's correct, the French often use se with faire and then the other verb, right? So they say on se fait avoir or je me fais avoir. And so she says on va pas se faire avoir deux fois. So the French love to, when they're talking about passive things, whereas in English we would say to be had or to be chased or to be wanted, right? The French wouldn't necessarily say être voulu, être chassé, right? They would say se faire chasser, se faire manger, right? Or se faire vouloir, right? Something like that. And it's still a concept that I'm trying to get my head around because it's very French. But this is a case of using the causatif with that construction. So that's the third use of le causatif.
La France d'en haut nous a encore bien enfumés, j'accuse. On va pas se faire avoir deux fois.
And the fourth use of le causatif here is when he says ne me fais pas perdre mon temps.
Monsieur Pellegrini aimerait connaître l'adresse d'Hassane Diop.
Qui ça?
Salvatore.
Je vois pas du tout de qui vous parlez.
Arrête de me faire perdre mon temps. On pensait que t'avais compris à l'époque.
Ne me fais pas perdre mon temps. So when you talk about wasting time, they say perdre son temps. Perdre son temps, so losing time. And when you talk about wasting someone else's time, you faire perdre le temps de quelqu'un d'autre. Tu fais perdre le temps de quelqu'un d'autre. And so here he says, ne me fais pas perdre mon temps. Ne me fais pas perdre mon temps. So don't make me lose my time. Don't make me waste time. So again here, I would say I waste your time or I waste my time. But actually in French, it's more like you cause me to lose time. So that's the way you have to think about it and start to get your head around using le causatif.
Qui ça?
Salvatore.
Je vois pas du tout de qui vous parlez.
Arrête de me faire perdre mon temps. On pensait que t'avais compris à l'époque.
Alors, ça c'est tous mes commentaires sur le 4e épisode de Lupin. N'hésite pas à me dire dans les commentaires ci-dessous ce qui t'a plu le plus. I would really love to hear your thoughts on episode 4. What was your favorite word or expression or piece of grammar that you learned in this episode? Do let me know down in the comments below. Next week, you want to be subscribed because we're talking about the 5th and final part that is currently released of Lupin. I've loved doing these videos, so next week will be the final one of the episodes released before the next batch of episodes are released in the summertime, apparently. Merci beaucoup à tous mes supporters, les francophiles, ici sur YouTube et sur ko-fi.com. If you want to know more about how you can get things like early releases of my videos, bonus content, and the occasional Q&A with me, for example, and some funky little badges next to your username, and just want to support the channel, then do click on that join button down below or head over to ko-fi.com. All the links are down in the description. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. Merci beaucoup d'avoir regardé et jusqu'à la prochaine fois. Passe une très bonne semaine et oui, voilà, à la prochaine. Ciao.